Longtime viewers of this channel know my wife all too well, but I don't think I've ever told you specifically what it was about her that really closed the deal for me. She has a lot of great qualities, and picking just one isn't easy. But if I'm being honest with myself, with the benefit of wisdom that comes with old age, I can now definitively tell you what it was. My wife has a great can. And, perhaps more importantly, she let me touch it. You may be thinking I'm exaggerating. I've managed to secure my wife's permission to show you her can. Okay, fine. Maybe it has seen better days. This one's got some hours on it. But pragmatically speaking, it still works just fine. Now that said, and I hope you don't think less of me for this, I've gone and got myself a new side can. I know, it's not metal. That freaked me out a bit at first too, but let's face the music. It's 2019. All the best cans are plastic these days. This is a spill-proof can, which is more than I can say for mine. I got it on Amazon or online somewhere. All the other YouTube machinists have long since upgraded to these fancy new high-tech cutting-edge cans, and, well, I suppose I'm late to the party as usual. Anyway, I didn't gather you all here today to discuss my penchant for nice cans. I got a Rotary broach. Although they confer similar levels of dignified accomplishment, don't confuse this Rotary broach with this Rotary broach. One of these tells everyone you've made it in life, and the other one just gets you through the door at the club. Alright, settle down. Don't get your poobah hat all up in a bunch. I know it's not a brooch, it's a pin, fine. I've wanted one of these ever since I learned that they exist. And up until recently, I always figured I'd end up making one. And they're not all that complicated if you wanted to make your own. Just takes a ton of care and patience. And very likely a surface grinder to make the brooches. I didn't get all the brooch sizes I would have wanted, but beggars can't be choosers. And I have plenty of broken half-inch end mills just waiting to be turned into brooches. You may be wondering what a Rotary broach even is. It's a freaking milestone is what it's a tool for making not funny shapes, usually round ones, into funny shapes. In this case a hex, because the broach is a hex. But I believe you can have just about any shaped broach you want. Square, torques, spline, hearts, rainbows, whatever. In fact, check out the custom broaching I did on this bolt head. For now, if all goes well, I can cut internal hex shapes, at least the ones I have brooches for. You need a brooch for each size. To make this video a little more interesting, I wandered around my garage a bit and found 2, maybe 3 little projects we can use this for. Little things, screws mostly in fact, but it should be fun. And anybody that doesn't like fun, please raise your hand. Before we get to practical projects though, I'm eager to try this thing out. This works in either a mill or a lathe. I'm going to start off on the lathe, so I'll race you there. I've got a small aluminum cutoff. I've pre-drilled it. That's a few percent over the flat-to-flat dimension on the hex. And there's a really small chamfer. Just broke the edge. Provide a little bit of a lead-in for the sharp corners. The excitement was building. I was anxious to just plow my way into that when, let's say, a bit of an inconvenience cropped up. The Rotary broach has a 3/4 inch diameter shank, and my drill chuck doesn't open up that far. So unfortunately, I have no way to mount this tool. However, this lathe has a 3 Morse taper in the tailstock, and the Rotary broach fits in there just fine. You know what? I got an idea. I have a 3/4 inch adapter for the mill. So that's 3/4 inch straight shank. It's an end mill holder, which in this case goes to an ISO 30 taper. I wonder if it might not be better to make an adapter like this, but for the lathe. 3/4 inch to Morse taper 3. Sometimes, you just get a hunch and you gotta run with it. Hey, Stefan, Robin, I don't know if you guys are watching. Check out what my lathe can do. And this should be it. Got a 3 Morse taper in the back with the tang so I can actually remove it, and a 3/4 inch bore in the front. Set screw just to retain the rotary broach. I guess this is the moment. If all went well, I should be able to unlock my tailstock. All right. Morse tapers are self-locking. To get that out, I can either extend the quill so I can get a key in the back. I could drive this through to pop the tooling out. But on lathes, you can usually fully retract the tailstock to bump the tool out. Oh, sorry about that. Those results are likely hard to see. I'm having trouble seeing them myself. Pull it out of the lathe and try to backlight it. Hey, that looks pretty good. It did have some chips down on the bottom. What I did is I flipped this part and counterbored it just so I could get those chips to fall out. Let's try an Allen wrench in there. I think I can proceed with my projects now. One thing I'm not sure about, I'll have to do some homework, are the speeds and feeds for a rotary broach. I don't know if that broach is particularly sharp or they just cut awesome by the nature of how they do what they do, but it was very light on the hand wheel. I was really just trying to keep the broach moving consistently, constant speed, more than I was actually pushing my way through, like you might expect with a non-rotating broach. Let's make a couple of parts and we'll talk about how these things actually work, how they do their cutting. This is the oil fill port on my motorbike engine. Some time ago, the OEM plug broke, and I made this replacement. At the time, and frankly I'm now embarrassed to admit, I was rotary broachless. So I simply slotted the head, and as you can see, it looks terrible. I'm not 100%, but I think this is affecting my performance, mentally. So let's make another one. At the time, and I don't remember exactly, I think this took me about 7 hours to make. But now that I have a rotary broach, I should be able to cut that down to 6.5. And to think, they want like $10 for one of them. I think I'm going to make the new one out of bronze. Mostly for the bling factor, but I was digging through the scrap bin and found this short little piece. It'll be tight, but I think I can get that out of there. I mean, there's enough material there to get a new plug out of. Just work holding might be a little tricky. Thermal expansion of bronze is less than aluminum, and this bolt creates a face seal, so I think I should be alright. Not to mention, none of what I just said probably matters anyway. I had to clean that groove up a little bit. The die chased some threads into what will become the O-ring seat. And while I was here, I just knocked the corner off the back edge. Now to flip this around and hold on to that threaded portion, I've found a nut that matches that thread and just split it with a zip disc. This happens to be a lock nut. It doesn't have to be a lock nut. It's just the only one I had that matches. I'm not going to snug that up completely. Now I should be able to use that split nut as an intermediate clamp. Obviously you'd want to leave the gap between two of the jaws. I don't know why it's so difficult to film hexes. I didn't want to go too deep there, as this cut gets really close to the groove for the O-ring, so that's the sort of section of least to material, and that's where the original one broke. I think that should work. Just want to polish it up a little bit. When it comes to polishing, it's a bit of a fine line. You want it shiny enough to catch the lady's attention. Not so shiny a magpie might swoop down and steal your motorcycle. Alright, I think that's it. Let's go try it out. I don't know about you, but I think that looks pretty good. Oh crap. The trick these things have up their sleeve that gets them doing what they do is hard to show on camera. In fact, it's even hard to see when you're holding it in person unless you're already looking for it. The broach, the actual cutting broach, is attached to the holder at a slight angle. It's about 1 degree, I believe. Not very much at all. This shank and cup, I guess, is all straight, coaxial. But the bore on the inside, where the bearings go that hold the broach, are canted at about a 1 degree angle. Hold on a minute. At first blush, this is perhaps what you see, but in fact the cutting tool, as I mentioned, is mounted at an angle. Not this much of course, but the ability to exaggerate is the whole point of my resorting to brutish analogies. The very small angle means the cutting tool touches the work on only one cutting edge, because it's crooked, right? Combine that with its ability to rotate, because of the bearings, the crooked broach bit can spin, and the end effect is a broach that sort of wobbles. Not a lot, but rotary broaches wobble. I only just got this, so I can't tell you yet if they fall down. Perhaps it's not as intuitive since I demonstrated on the lathe where the tool stays still and the work rotates. But think of this broach as a universal joint in a mill or a drill, where you're spinning it and driving it into the work. Perhaps the fact that it wobbles and there's only one cutting edge touching at a time is more intuitive in that situation. This is a regular broach, non-spinny kind. At least it shouldn't be anyway. This happens to be for keyways, but it does the same job, turning not funny shapes into funny shapes. A regular broach like this just gets pushed through the work, usually using a press of some kind and strong-arming its way through. I still have one analogy left for this video, so might as well cash it in now. Imagine, if you will, this chisel is our regular broach, like a keyway broach. We just push it through. It works because it's sharp. It might take a ton of force, but it works. I mean, I don't know if it's a ton. Depends on the size of your broach probably, but it takes a lot of force. In comparison, a rotary broach works in smaller steps maybe, wobbling, slowly shearing its way through. I'm sure you've instinctively resorted to this wobbling motion with your dull chisels and know it takes less effort. There are some other subtle features built in that make this work well. The clearance angles on the broach tool and its overall length. It's no coincidence that all of these broaches are exactly the same length. But getting into those nuances is probably too much info for this video. As I mentioned earlier, sooner or later I'll be making my own broaches. I'd really like some square ones, and maybe we'll get into those details then. For now, however, I think that's it. I have a couple other projects I plan to keep you along for in this video, but on second thought, this is getting long and they're really just more of the same. Like the plug for that oil port. Remember this old boring head? The hex drive on the adjustment screw is all worn out. That I think is due to a combination of it being a brass screw and me making adjustments for final passes with the gibs tightened up. It still works, I just use a torque driver instead. I'll be putting a new hex in it, recutting that, but I think you've gotten the idea. Well, that's all for now. Hope you like that. Thanks for watching.